Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. The story begins not with silence, but with a voice, one that history almost buried. Over solemn music and flickering images of torn flags, stormy seas, and weathered hands clutching faded documents, a quote from a Black Loyalist flashes on screen: "We have not been idle, but we are neglected." These words, spoken in the 18th century, speak louder today than ever before. Thousands of Black men, women, and children fled to British lines during the American Revolution, escaping slavery and war in pursuit of freedom. Many were promised land, liberty, and protection if they served the crown, and many believed it. But what happened next is a story few Canadians know. After the war, over 3,000 Black Loyalists were evacuated from the newly formed United States and brought to the rugged shores of Nova Scotia. They arrived with hope, some even with military records or skills, but they quickly encountered a new kind of hardship. This wasn't the freedom they were promised. The land grants were delayed or denied. The soil was poor, the winters brutal, and racism deeply entrenched. While white loyalists were welcomed and resettled with speed and support, Black loyalists faced isolation, broken promises, and systemic barriers that mirrored the slavery they had escaped. Their struggle, perseverance, and community building helped shape early Black Canadian identity, yet their legacy has been largely forgotten in mainstream history. Why were their voices silenced? What became of the settlements they founded? And why are these stories, so central to the Canadian experience, still missing from textbooks and popular memory? This is the mystery at the heart of the Black Loyalist. Migration. A tale of courage, betrayal, resilience, and erasure. One that deserves to be remembered, not just as a footnote to the American Revolution, but as a defining chapter in Canada's past. In the 18th century, slavery was deeply woven into the fabric of British North America. Enslaved Africans were present not only in the southern colonies but also in what would become Canada. Though smaller in scale, slavery existed in Nova Scotia, Quebec, and other British-held territories. Enslaved people worked in households, on farms and at the docks, denied basic rights and subjected to lives of hard labor and legal bondage. The British Empire, despite its growing reputation for law and order, was still complicit in the trade and ownership of human beings. When the American Revolutionary War broke out in 1775, it upended life across the colonies, not just for white settlers, but especially for the hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans living under American rule. For them, the war wasn't just a political struggle, it was a potential path to freedom. The British, seeking to destabilize the rebellion, made a radical promise. Enslaved people who fled their American masters and joined the British side would be granted their freedom. This offer, made in proclamations like that of Lord Dunmore in 1775 and reinforced in subsequent years, sparked hope and rebellion. Thousands responded to the call, fleeing plantations and towns in the chaos of war. These men and women became known as Black Loyalists. Some served as soldiers, laborers, guides, and scouts for the British military. Others worked behind the lines, supporting the war effort in exchange for the promise of liberation. For many, this was the first time they were acknowledged as individuals rather than property. But their freedom came at a steep price, risking capture, re-enslavement, or death. And even for those who survived the war, the promise of a better life remained uncertain. As the war drew to a close and British forces prepared to evacuate, they faced a moral and logistical challenge. What to do with the thousands of formerly enslaved people who had trusted them? The solution would send more than 3,000 Black Loyalists to the cold, unfamiliar coasts of Nova Scotia, a land of hope, hardship, and soon, heartbreak. In 1783, as the British prepared to evacuate their remaining forces from the rebellious American colonies, they faced a profound commitment to those who had fought and served in exchange for freedom. Among them were over 3,000 Black Loyalists, men, women, and children, who had risked everything by fleeing enslavement and siding with the British during the American Revolutionary War. These individuals could not remain in the newly independent United States, where their former enslavers demanded their return, and where freedom, even for those who had earned it in war, was far from guaranteed. To honor their promise, the British organized a massive evacuation. Ships left from New York City and other ports, bound for various British territories, including the cold, rugged shores of Nova Scotia. The journey was long and difficult. Passengers were packed tightly aboard overcrowded vessels with limited food, inadequate shelter, and poor sanitation. Disease and exposure were constant threats, and many arrived sick or weakened by the ordeal. They disembarked in unfamiliar and often inhospitable environments, such as Birchtown, Shelburne, and Annapolis Royal, where the climate and terrain posed immediate challenges. This migration was meticulously recorded in a historic document known as the Book of Negroes. Compiled by British officials, this ledger cataloged the names, ages, occupations, and personal histories of the Black Loyalists. It was a rare act of documentation that humanized people who had long been treated as property. Their stories, written in ink, provide a powerful window into the lives of those who sought liberty through loyalty. The book lists men who had served as soldiers or laborers, women who had fled with young children, and elders who simply longed to live free in their final years. The journey to Nova Scotia was meant to be the beginning of a new chapter, a life of dignity and opportunity. But for many Black Loyalists, it became the start of yet another struggle, as they encountered cold winters, broken promises, and a new kind of systemic oppression in the land where they had hoped to find peace. Upon arriving in Nova Scotia, the Black Loyalists began the difficult task of building new lives from the ground up. With few resources and minimal support, they established settlements in remote and rugged areas allocated by British officials. The most prominent of these was Birchtown, near Shelburne. At its peak, Birchtown became the largest free Black settlement in North America, a remarkable feat considering its humble and challenging beginnings. It represented both a refuge and a test of endurance, as hundreds of formerly enslaved families attempted to create stability in a land that was often cold, unwelcoming, and unfamiliar. Other communities emerged as well. In addition to Birchtown, Black Loyalists settled in areas like Preston, the Annapolis Valley, and Digby. These regions were often marginal lands, rocky, forested, and difficult to farm. Promised plots of fertile soil and fair treatment, Black settlers quickly realized that those assurances from the Crown were mostly empty. While white Loyalists received prime land, tools, and government rations, Black Loyalists were forced to wait months or years for inferior land, and many were never granted legal title at all. Life in these early Black settlements was grueling. The winters were especially cruel for people who had come from the American South and Caribbean, and whose shelters were often poorly constructed and ill-insulated. Despite these conditions, the communities endured. People came together to build homes, churches, and schools. They created a network of resilience rooted in shared history, faith, and hope. But survival required more than just hard work. The Black Loyalists faced constant discrimination from both white settlers and colonial officials. In places like Shelburne, hostility boiled over into violence. White Loyalists, resentful of competition for jobs and fueled by racism, rioted in 1784, attacking Black homes and laborers in what became one of the first recorded race riots in North America. Despite this hostility, the Black Loyalist communities persisted, holding fast to their freedom and identity. These settlements were more than just places on a map. They were symbols of both betrayal and determination. The land may have been poor and the promises broken, but the people who lived there turned their hardship into a legacy that would shape the Black experience in Canada for generations. The promise of freedom in Nova Scotia quickly gave way to a harsh reality of racism and exclusion. For the Black Loyalists who had risked everything by siding with the British, the welcome they received from white Loyalists was anything but equal. Many white settlers viewed their Black neighbors not as fellow Loyalists or freedom seekers, but as threats, competition for scarce resources, jobs, and land in a struggling colony. The deep racial prejudices that existed in the former American colonies followed both groups to their new home in British North America. Tensions steadily grew, particularly in Shelburne, where Black Loyalists had settled nearby in Birchtown and worked as laborers, carpenters, and skilled tradesmen. Their willingness to work for lower wages sparked resentment among white Loyalists, many of whom felt entitled to privileged treatment from the British Crown. That resentment reached a boiling point in July 1784, just a year after arrival, when White Loyalists launched a violent and coordinated attack against Black residents. The Shelburne riots of 1784 are now recognized as North America's first recorded race riot. Over the course of several days, white rioters looted and destroyed homes, assaulted Black workers, and drove dozens of families from their homes. The violence was not just spontaneous anger, it was a brutal assertion of racial hierarchy, a declaration that Black people, even those who had fought and suffered for freedom, would not be treated as equals. British authorities did little to punish the perpetrators or protect the victims, sending a clear message about whose interests came first in the fledgling colony. Beyond the riot, systemic discrimination continued in everyday life. Black Loyalists were frequently denied the basic supplies and rations promised to them by the British. Jobs were hard to come by, especially for those who tried to earn wages in towns dominated by white settlers. Legal protections were almost non-existent, and most Black Loyalists were excluded from the land ownership that was critical to establishing long-term stability and wealth. Despite this, many persevered, clinging to faith, family, and the fragile hope that justice would one day follow freedom. The Shelburne riots stand as a brutal reminder of how liberation without equality is no liberation at all, and how the struggle for dignity continued long after the war was over. By the late 18th century, many Black Loyalists in Nova Scotia had become disillusioned with the promises of freedom and prosperity that had been made to them. The harsh conditions they faced, poor land, racism, inadequate resources, and unfulfilled promises, had worn down even the most hopeful. For those who had sought refuge in Nova Scotia, the reality of their situation was far from the vision of a thriving, free community they had once imagined. In 1792, more than 1,000 Black Nova Scotians made the difficult decision to leave their homes and embark on a new journey. Nearly 1,200 men, women, and children set sail for Sierra Leone, a colony in West Africa that had been established as a resettlement area for freed slaves. The British government, once again offering them a chance at a fresh start, provided ships and assistance for the exodus. For many of the Black Loyalists, this was seen as their last hope, a final attempt to escape the ongoing discrimination and poverty in Nova Scotia and to reclaim a sense of autonomy in a place where they could truly be free. The voyage to Sierra Leone was arduous, with many facing disease and difficult conditions during the long trip across the Atlantic. Upon their arrival, they encountered another set of challenges. The land was unfamiliar, and the environment was vastly different from the rugged shores of Nova Scotia. While the settlers in Sierra Leone faced challenges, they also began to build communities and establish a foothold in their new homeland. Over time, the descendants of these Black Nova Scotians formed strong, vibrant communities, and the Sierra Leonean Creole people, today's descendants, trace their lineage back to those who left Canada for Africa. This migration from Nova Scotia to Sierra Leone became a turning point in the history of the Black Loyalist experience. Though they had been displaced, oppressed, and often forgotten by Canadian society, their legacy endured in Africa. Today, descendants of the Black Nova Scotians who made that journey continue to live in Sierra Leone, and their connection to their Canadian roots remains a significant part of both their cultural heritage and the broader history of Black migration and resilience. In many ways, the story of the exodus to Sierra Leone is a testament to the endurance of a people who, despite being displaced from their homes in North America, never gave up on their search for a place where they could be free, respected, and build a better life for future generations. Over time, the once thriving Black settlements of Nova Scotia, such as Birchtown and Shelburne, began to decline. The promises made by the British had never been fully realized, and the harsh conditions, combined with ongoing racism and neglect, made it difficult for these communities to flourish. Many of the Black Loyalists who had stayed in Nova Scotia began to disperse, seeking better opportunities elsewhere. Some moved to urban centers, while others, including the descendants of those who had emigrated to Sierra Leone, established new communities where they could find relative stability and independence. However, despite their efforts, the stories of these early Black settlers remained largely forgotten in Canadian mainstream history. Their contributions, military service, community building, and the quest for freedom were marginalized or overshadowed by the dominant narratives of white loyalists and colonial settlers. The history of Black Loyalists was not widely taught, their legacies not honored, and their struggles often erased from public memory. For generations, their achievements and hardships went unacknowledged, buried beneath the weight of colonialism and racial inequality. The legacy of these Black Loyalists and their descendants, however, did not disappear entirely. In the 20th century, the memory of Black Nova Scotians began to resurface, especially with the recognition of Africville, a Black community in Halifax that endured its own struggles for recognition and justice. Africville, like the earlier Black Loyalist settlements, was marked by poverty, neglect, and systemic racism. In the 1960s, the community was displaced when the city of Halifax decided to demolish Africville, uprooting families and destroying their homes, all while failing to provide adequate compensation or support. The struggle for Africville's recognition became a symbol of the ongoing challenges faced by Black Canadians, challenges that echoed the earlier betrayals of the Black Loyalists. Today, the descendants of the Black Loyalists and the residents of Africville continue to confront the legacy of systemic racism that began in the 18th century. Yet, they also persist in efforts to preserve and celebrate their cultural heritage. The Black communities in Nova Scotia, particularly in places like Halifax, are filled with stories of resilience, survival, and cultural preservation. These communities have fought for recognition, for reparations, and for the opportunity to share their history with future generations. The ongoing legacy of the Black Loyalists is a story of endurance and cultural survival, one that has been overlooked for too long but continues to shape the identity of Black Canadians today. Their stories, finally being heard and acknowledged, remind us that the struggle for justice and equality is far from over. It is a call to confront the past, honor those who fought for freedom, and ensure that their contributions are never forgotten again. In recent decades, there has been a growing movement to rediscover and honor the contributions of the Black Loyalists, a significant but often forgotten part of Canadian history. Historians, cultural organizations, and museums have worked tirelessly to bring their stories to light and ensure that their legacy is not lost to time. One of the most important institutions in this effort is the Black Loyalist Heritage Center in Birchtown, Nova Scotia. The center serves as a hub for education, preservation, and celebration of the Black Loyalist experience. Here, visitors can learn about the lives of these early settlers through exhibits, artifacts, and interactive displays, all while reflecting on the resilience and struggles of the Black communities that built Nova Scotia's early history. In addition to the Black Loyalist Heritage Center, there have been growing efforts by academics and community activists to ensure that the history of the Black Loyalists is included in Canadian curriculum. Many schools now offer more comprehensive studies of Canada's diverse history, with a focus on the contributions of Black Canadians, including the vital role played by the Black Loyalists. Cultural revival has also come through public art projects, documentaries, and storytelling initiatives that highlight the lives and experiences of those who helped shape Canada, even in the face of immense adversity. Tourism has played a part in bringing attention to this history as well. Heritage tours that explore the sites where Black Loyalists once lived, such as Birchtown, Shelburne, and Halifax, have become popular attractions. These tours offer not only a glimpse into the past, but also serve as a reminder of the injustices that were faced by these communities. The rise of heritage tourism has helped reintegrate the stories of Black Loyalists into Nova Scotia's modern identity, while also providing economic opportunities for local communities. Perhaps most importantly, modern descendants of the Black Loyalists have become powerful voices in this rediscovery process. Individuals and organizations continue to speak out for greater recognition and reparations, while emphasizing the need to honor the contributions of their ancestors. Activists, many of whom are descendants of the original Black Loyalists, often draw upon their families' legacies to highlight the ongoing struggles for racial justice and equality in Canada. These voices continue to demand the acknowledgement of past wrongs and the affirmation of their rightful place in Canadian history. One powerful quote from Sylvia Hamilton, a filmmaker and activist who has worked to bring attention to the history of Black Nova Scotians, reflects the impact of this rediscovery. The Black Loyalist story is not just an African-Canadian story. It is a Canadian story. We cannot understand the history of this nation without acknowledging the struggles, sacrifices, and contributions of Black people. Through the efforts of historians, community leaders, and modern descendants, the forgotten story of the Black Loyalists is being recognized, celebrated, and shared with a new generation. This cultural revival helps Canadians reflect on the painful past, recognize the resilience of these communities, and take steps toward healing and inclusivity in the present. For far too long, the story of the Black Loyalists and the vibrant communities they built in Nova Scotia was pushed to the margins of Canadian history. Whether through deliberate erasure, systemic racism, or simple neglect, these narratives were excluded from classrooms, textbooks, and public memory. And yet, their legacy remains vital, not just to Black Canadians, but to the nation as a whole. These were people who risked everything for the promise of freedom, contributed to the founding of Canadian society, and endured extraordinary hardship with unwavering resilience. As we reflect on why these communities were forgotten, we are also faced with an opportunity. We can choose to learn, to honor, and to amplify the voices of those who came before. Supporting Black Canadian heritage, whether by visiting museums, reading the stories, or sharing them with others, is a crucial step in preserving the legacy of the Black Loyalists and ensuring their contributions are never erased again. If you found this story compelling, don't stop here. Dive deeper into the history. Visit the Black Loyalist Heritage Center, read the Book of Negroes, listen to the voices of descendants still carrying this legacy today. And if this video moved you, please like and subscribe to help us bring more forgotten stories to light. Let's start a conversation. Had you heard of Birchtown or the Black Loyalists before? Tell us in the comments below.